To multiply complex numbers, we get to use procedures that we're already familiar with, but we always have to keep in mind whenever we see an I squared or a power of I that we want to simplify that thing down and simplify our work. So let's start off with 4i times 2i. Well, we're going to get 8i squared, and I squared is equal to -1. So our answer becomes -8. We may need to use the distributive property, so if we have 4i times 2 plus 3i, then when we distribute the 4i in, we're going to get 8i, and when we distribute the 4 over here, we're going to get plus 12i squared. So we have 8i. I squared becomes -1, so that's going to be plus 12 times -1, or 8i minus 12. And generally when we're writing a complex number, we want the real part to go in front and the imaginary part to go in back. So if we're going to move this 12, we need to make sure the negative comes along with it. So we get -12 plus 8i. If we want to multiply two complex numbers together, we can just use the FOIL method like we used to use for binomials. So when we multiply the first terms together, we're going to get 14. Our outer terms will give us plus 28i. Our inner terms will give us minus 6i. And our last terms will be minus 12i squared. So we have some simplifying to do. We've got 14. 28i minus 6i will be plus 22i. And then our minus 12i squared. But I squared is equal to -1, so we can write this as 14 plus 22i plus 12. So altogether we have 26 plus 22i. Recall that we had a rule for square roots that said if we have the square root of ab, we can break this up as the square root of a times the square root of b. We cheated a little bit and didn't put real strict specifications on this because we weren't quite ready to understand the restrictions on when we can use this rule. But it turns out we can't use this rule when a and b are both negative, and we'll see why. So if we're going to simplify the square root of -25 times the square root of -4, from the work we've been doing, we can see that the square root of -25 is going to be 5i. And the square root of -4 is going to be 2i. So when we multiply those together, we're going to get 10i squared, which becomes -10. Now, if we weren't careful and we took the square root of -25 times the square root of -4 and combined those together to get the square root of 100, we would then say, oh, well, the square root of 100 is 10. But see how we're getting a different answer? And it turns out this one is wrong. We don't want to use that one. So when you're dealing with square roots of negative numbers, it's always important to bring I into the equation.